A tired young man, worn down by life's hardships, wandered through the dusty path of a small village. His mind was heavy with questions he could not answer, his heart restless with discontent. Under the gentle shade of a sprawling banyan tree sat Gautam Buddha, serene and still, his presence radiating calm. The young man, unable to hold back his frustration, stepped forward and spoke with urgency. Why is life so unfair? Why are some people born into wealth, living in comfort and abundance, while others, like me, are left to struggle in poverty? His voice trembled, not only with anger but with the weight of years of silent pain. The villagers nearby, carrying water pots and tending to their chores, slowed their movements. One by one, they turned their attention to the exchange. They had all, at some point in their lives, wondered the same. The air seemed to thicken with curiosity as they waited for the Buddha's reply. But instead of answering immediately, Buddha looked at the young man with eyes that held neither judgment nor pity, only understanding. He motioned for the man to sit beside him, the warm earth grounding their feet. In that moment, time seemed to pause. The leaves above rustled gently in the breeze, as though the tree itself leaned in to hear. The young man's chest rose and fell rapidly, his anticipation mingling with a strange calm in the Buddha's presence. He felt seen in a way he hadn't before, as though his question was not just about wealth and poverty, but about the meaning of life itself. The villagers drew closer, silent but attentive, knowing that whatever would follow might not only answer the young man's question but speak to something deep within them all. Buddha's lips curved into a gentle smile, the kind that seemed to carry centuries of wisdom. "Come," he said softly, "I will show you." Without another word, he rose, his simple robes swaying slightly as he began walking down the village path. The young man followed, still clutching his question, his curiosity now mingled with anticipation. The narrow lanes wound between mud-brick homes, the scent of wood smoke drifting in the air. Their first stop was at a grand house with tall carved doors and polished stone floors. Inside, shelves gleamed with ornaments of gold and silver. Servants moved quietly, their faces expressionless, their eyes avoiding contact. The air was heavy, almost suffocating in its silence. The young man glanced at Buddha, expecting to see awe, but the master's face remained calm, unreadable. They left the mansion and walked further until they reached a small, weather-worn hut at the edge of the village. Its walls were patched with straw and clay, and the roof sagged in places. Yet before they could even knock, the door burst open, and a woman's warm voice called out in greeting. Inside, a family gathered around a low wooden table, their clothes faded but their smiles bright. The room was filled with the sound of laughter, the kind that bubbled up freely and spread like sunlight. A child ran forward, offering them a seat, while another poured water into clay cups. The young man sat quietly, taking it all in. He could not understand how a home with so little could feel so full, and how a house with so much could feel so empty. His question about wealth and poverty was still there, but now it carried a deeper, more personal confusion he could not yet name. Buddha reached into the fold of his robe and pulled out 2 small cloth bags, each filled with rice. Without explanation, he handed one to the master of the wealthy household and the other to the mother of the poor family. The rich man accepted the bag with a polite nod, barely glancing at it before setting it aside on a shelf already stacked with jars of grain. There was no word of thanks, no spark of interest, just a quick return to his own affairs, as if the gift meant nothing at all. The young man watched silently, a faint frown forming on his face. They left the grand home and walked back to the humble hut. When the poor mother received the rice, her eyes lit up as though she had been given a feast fit for kings. Without a moment's hesitation, she called her children to prepare the fire. The aroma of fresh rice soon filled the tiny space, mingling with the laughter and chatter of the family. But the invitation did not stop at the doorway. As Buddha and the young man sat on the floor, the woman beckoned to a passing traveler outside and even called to 2 weary laborers returning from the fields. Soon, everyone was gathered in a circle, sharing the simple meal from clay bowls. The food was plain, yet each bite was filled with warmth, gratitude, and togetherness. The young man could feel it. The air in the room seemed lighter, almost glowing with contentment. It wasn't the rice itself that made it so, but the way it was given and shared. In that moment, he sensed that the poor family's joy was richer than any gold he had seen, though he did not yet fully understand why. As they stepped out of the small hut, the evening sun cast a warm golden glow over the village. The laughter from inside still floated through the open doorway, lingering in the air like the scent of the freshly cooked rice. The young man glanced back one last time, watching the family continue their meal, their faces alight with a joy that seemed untouched by the limits of their possessions. Buddha walked beside him in silence for a moment, the sound of their footsteps soft on the dusty path. Then, in a voice calm and steady, he spoke, "Wealth is not measured by coins but by the heart's capacity to give." The words seemed to settle deep inside the young man, like seeds falling into fertile soil. He thought of the grand mansion they had visited earlier, its gleaming treasures and perfect order, but also its cold, empty rooms, where even a gift of food was met with indifference. Then he recalled the humble hut, where cracked walls could not contain the warmth of the people within, where even strangers were welcomed as family. Something shifted within him. The question that had burned in his heart began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet clarity. It was not the size of one's fortune that decided true wealth, but the willingness to share whatever one had, no matter how little. The young man felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted from his shoulders. They walked on, the banyan tree now visible in the distance. The young man's steps were slower, not from weariness, but from the weight of a new truth taking root, a truth that would change the way he saw the world forever. When the young man returned to his own village, the weight in his heart was gone. The bitterness that had once clouded his days had been replaced by a quiet, steady warmth. He no longer looked at his meager belongings with resentment. Instead, he saw them as tools, small but powerful, that could be used to bring joy to others. The first day, he offered a portion of his bread to a hungry child who sat alone by the roadside. The next, he helped an elderly neighbor carry water from the well. Soon, it became a habit, not out of obligation, but because each act seemed to fill him with a peace deeper than anything he had known. He began to notice how a simple gesture, a shared meal, a kind word, a helping hand, could brighten someone's entire day. The villagers, once accustomed to his distant and brooding nature, now saw a different man, one who smiled easily, who greeted others warmly, and who gave without hesitation. His home was still modest, but it was never empty. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers often gathered there, drawn by the warmth of his presence. And though he owned little, he felt as though he possessed everything. He understood now what Buddha had meant, that wealth is not stored in coins or treasures, but in the generosity of the heart. As the story closes, the narrator's voice carries the final truth: some are rich because they give, some are poor because they only take. The richest heart is the one that shares. The young man's life had not just changed, it had become a living example of those words, a quiet reminder that true abundance comes from giving, not having. The story of the young man's journey with Gautam Buddha is a gentle yet powerful reminder that the true measure of wealth lies not in possessions, but in the spirit of generosity. Through his encounters with both the rich household and the poor family, he witnessed firsthand that joy and contentment are born from giving, not hoarding. The rich, despite their abundance, lived in emotional poverty, untouched by the warmth of sharing, while the poor, though lacking in material comfort, possessed a richness of heart that overflowed to everyone around them. Buddha's simple yet profound lesson, that wealth is the heart's capacity to give, transformed the young man from a bitter observer of life's inequalities into an active source of kindness and light in his own community. His actions prove that anyone, regardless of their circumstances, has the power to make the world richer through compassion. In the end, the story speaks to all of us, across time and cultures. True prosperity is not what we keep, but what we give away. The richest heart is not the one that owns the most, but the one that shares the most. And in that sharing, we find the deepest peace and the most lasting joy.